You're asking, I guess, for a fiscal update here. We have 5 days to go. We don't even know if the throne speech is going to be voted on before the end of the year. What makes you think that these three things can actually be done? Like, we don't really have that much time.
So the question is whether we have enough time for a fiscal update. You seem to be suggesting that our Prime Minister spent his first 10 days after the election surfing rather than working. I find that suggestion offensive. Of course, if the Prime Minister and his government are all responsible, they would have been working on all of these issues from the day the election was over. Let's remember, the election was in October. They've had plenty of time. The storm clouds of our economy have been gathering overhead for a long time. So if they are this ill prepared for the trouble that is unfolding, it says something about their ability to govern. You know, the average Canadian wasn't surfing in November. The average Canadian was worried about his or her job. 71,000 of them lost their jobs. And then we got a report that south of the border, they had 250,000 new jobs. So this is a made-in-Canada problem. It requires urgent action, and we're calling on the government to take that action by introducing a fall economic update.
This conversation right after the election either.
We've been calling on the government to reverse course on its damaging policies nonstop, including before the election. We're ready to. We're here to work, and I'd be curious to hear Bill Morneau's explanation as to why he hasn't been able to introduce a fall economic update. You seem to be defending that decision on behalf of the government. You're saying it's too late for them now. When was the last time they didn't introduce a fall economic update? You know, they seem to be completely ill-prepared for the economic troubles that are now besieging our economy and hitting Canadians in their pocketbook and with pink slips. We are prepared, and that's why we're calling on the government to get back to work, restart the economy, and introduce a fall economic update.
Let me switch gears and ask you a little bit about China. We have Michael Kovrig and Spavor that are going to be in jail here for a year now in China this week. You guys have put a few motions of notice on board for China. What exactly do the Conservatives want done here?
Well, we need to return to professional diplomacy. We have a Prime Minister who said that when asked what his favorite country in the world was to emulate, he said he admired the basic Chinese dictatorship. We have a Foreign Minister who says that China's justice system is a rules-based system. They've gone through 3 ambassadors in less than that number of years. They had an ambassador who was effectively towing the PRC's party line, whom they've had to remove from his position. So we need to return to serious, professional, tough, clear-eyed diplomacy to free the 2 Michaels from their unjust captivity and to end the Chinese government's attack on the Canadian economy with the periodic application of tariffs. And finally, we need to protect our own security by banning Huawei from Canada's 5G network to ensure that the PRC does not have the ability to engage in espionage on Canadians or our government.
You've also, I think I saw something about a committee that you wanted formed. Am I wrong about that? Maybe just
we are considering. We have a motion on the order paper that we may advance that would allow all parties to come together and form a committee that would study the urgent problems we have with China on trade, on Huawei, and on, of course, the 2 Michaels who are unjustly imprisoned there.
Elise Van Schiel, CBC News.
Hi. So the House isn't going to sit for too much longer before the Christmas break. We have another week, so your expectation is that Bill Morneau would deliver this before next Friday when the House rises?
I presume he's got it already written. If he's competent, he's got it already written. But that is not a safe assumption. We're prepared to work through the Christmas break if necessary. You know, when you've got 71,000 people who've lost their jobs, when you have half of the country $200 away from insolvency, when you have insolvency rates reaching 10-year highs, you need to work. And I'm sorry if the Liberals have vacation plans, cancel them. introduce a fall economic update that will allow Canadians to keep their jobs and grow their incomes. It's an urgent problem, and it has to be solved.
Just switching gears a little bit, beyond what your party's been talking about in the couple of days that we've had back since the election in Parliament, what do you think your party needs to do over the coming months to show Canadians that you're in a position and in good shape to take on the Liberals whenever the next election's called?
We need to provide a professional opposition that's focused on the aspirations of everyday Canadians. People want to get ahead. They're willing to work hard to do so. They want to take risks by starting small businesses in their community. We want to be the party of that aspirational middle class. We're presenting real and tangible ideas that will allow people to make progress in their lives, to get government off their back and out of their way and by their side. That's the kind of opposition we need to provide, and it's what we're going to advocate on the floor of the House of Commons in the days, weeks, and months ahead.
Kind of a tactic during the campaign as well, and if that message didn't get through to Canadians, as your leader has suggested, what do you need to shift to make sure that those things that you're highlighting are getting through this time?
Well, we believe that everyday Canadians want an alternative that will allow them to work hard, pursue their own dreams, independent of the edicts of politicians and bureaucrats who would and big government. We are the only party that stands for those things. Let me say, there's some that out there that say, you know, the trendy pundits that you bring on CBC to offer their commentary. Often these are brought on as party strategists, the people who've never actually run elections or won elections. They tell us that we need to abandon everything we believe in, that we need to embrace big government, high deficits, and high taxes. We've heard that suggestion. That is the absolute worst thing Conservatives could do. It would be an electoral, political, and economic disaster for the country if we went down that road. So our goal is not to just fit in with the four socialist parties. Our goal will be to stand out as the only voice of taxpayers, as the only voice of fiscal responsibility, as the only voice for hardworking, aspirational entrepreneurs and workers who get out of bed every morning and try to improve their lives by doing the right thing. That is how we will win.
Are there any questions? Y a-t-il d'autres questions? Olivia?
How do you do all that when there is an internal battle, even within your own party, over your leader, Andrew Scheer?
Well, I think it's by focusing on what's important. I've been to probably a dozen Christmas events this season. And when I go to those events, what are people talking about? Talking about their lives, and they want us to talk about their lives as well. They want you to report on things that matter to their lives, rather than just on the obsessions of the political class in downtown Ottawa. And the things that matter in everyday people's lives is that their drive to work is longer, their incomes are flat, they're worried about losing their jobs, and we're going to be the single party that stands out in fighting for those people. Yes.
Can you elaborate on that? You haven't really mentioned that throughout all these questions that we put to you.
Yes, I have.
Any other?
Good evening, YouTube. Good evening, my fellow Canadians who may be watching.
Canada has...
This video will be about Pierre Poilievre, of course, a politician I greatly admire. This man should have been the leader of the Conservative Party, and if he was, we potentially could have won. The trouble is, and there was a question asked of him earlier, is that, does he have any plans for leadership? And he promptly said no. But I respect what Pierre is trying to bring out, despite the media being extremely biased and asking questions designed to trip him up and trap him and so on. He stays pretty much on point. 71,000 jobs plus lost in 1 month. 250,000 jobs created in the U.S. And the growth rate is, the unemployment rate is in line with socialist countries, and the growth rate is the lowest it's ever been. And there's no reason for a Canadian manufactured problem. So for me, Poilievre, I only wish that he had run as leader of the Conservative Party, because that would have been great. The problem with Max, and I like him a lot, but the problem with him is that I believe he was not patient enough with himself, with his own party members, to endure long enough that if there was a leadership race again, to hang on until the right moment and take power away from Scheer. Because as I understand it, they already had a toss-up race between Bernier and Scheer, and Bernier narrowly lost. And I believe the reason was of his involvement in some kind of Hell's Angels activity because of a former girlfriend, which was sort of like a political scar, if you will. It was not, didn't destroy his career, but it certainly damaged his reputation. Anyhow, after Max formed the PPC, then that potential future was gone. So Pierre seems to be an ideal candidate. Him and Michel Rempel were my two favorite conservatives, and there are many others, but I really enjoy them because a lot of their content on YouTube I appreciate. But Poilievre raises a great point, that the Liberals are taking their vacation, that Justin Trudeau is surfing and doing publicity nonsense, whilst Canadians are suffering, losing their jobs, losing their livelihoods. They don't care about all these pseudo-ideals that the Liberals hold. Because it's not even about any of those topics anymore. Now it's about mere survival. And when Gwyn Morgan talked about that on BNN Bloomberg, he talked about honest people, good, hard-working people being pushed to a point where they could break. Then you just don't know what they'll do. I believe in that. Or at least I hope for it. I hope that something like a semi-revolution could take place within people's hearts that would persuade them to open their eyes to the terrible leadership of the Liberal government and the direction in which they're taking this country, which can amount to nothing except our own sabotage. The Americans under Trump, hate him or like him, are prospering. And there's no reason for the Canadians not to do the same. But the problem is the leadership, naturally. So I really enjoyed when Poilievre talked about the carbon tax cover-up. That was fun for me. I enjoyed that he made sort of a parody about Justin Trudeau explaining the blackface scandal. I don't understand why Poilievre wouldn't run as a prime minister. Wouldn't run for the leadership race of the Conservative Party. Then by extension, prime minister. But essentially, he's a great orator, and he's very calm under pressure. But I think in his heart, he doesn't really want the responsibility of leadership. He wants to be more or less free to conduct himself as he sees fair for himself, let's say. Here's what I really wanted to bring to this video. The exposure of Canadians that are out of work is minimal. The exposure for people who tried to build a business, whom tried to struggle on to pay the ridiculous taxes and all the bureaucratic red tape that's been installed since Trudeau came to power, and still struggle to maintain their business, has very low publicity. I can show you a video, and I will, of an area that was heavily industrialized and full of business, just teeming with it. They couldn't get rid of the land, and they kept expanding and expanding in Calgary. And what is it now? It's completely abandoned. So my dad had a saying, when industry moves out, then you know the economy is terrible. You know the leadership is terrible. You know that the governing party is not doing the best it can for the country. As a G8 nation, there is no need for us to be on welfare. There's no need for us to have the massive unemployment that we have. There's no need for us to abandon our logic in business and prevent any business from being conducted, any entrepreneurial spirit from blooming. Yet, that is the reality that we live in right now. It saddens me and it angers me greatly that a country like Canada could have an economy comparable to socialist Italy, let's say. It's an embarrassment. The leadership that we have in the Conservative Party, that is the one that I blame the most for the failure to achieve victory despite massive ammunition to go to, let's say, a political war with his opponent. So let's face it, Scheer had everything. There is nothing that he can say to explain the loss, except that he didn't work hard enough and misrepresented himself and the party and played dirty politics with that stupid Kinsella case. I feel deeply angered at our loss in this country, because as we all know, the Americans are performing and outperforming every month they grow. And despite all the nonsense scandals, I do believe that Trump will be elected again, because people who work and get lots of money for working and lower taxes and all, they are happier. And they're most likely going to remember the person that made that happen for them. Because we all know what America was like under Obama. It was similar, if not worse, than it was here right now under Trudeau. You know, I look into the future. I hope Trudeau will be defeated in the next election. I hope for that. So I don't know where this country will end up if he remains in power. But essentially, history gets skewed. When I was a boy, I was taught that Pierre Trudeau was a great leader of our nation, the Prime Minister who invented multiculturalism in Canada. Then when I grew up and did a little bit more research, I figured out that Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau was the father of the Canadian debt. Billions and billions and billions of dollars wasted. And of course the NEB coming after Alberta and creating a massive disaster for Alberta, I might add. Similar to what's happening now. So the leadership is everything. I don't care what anybody says. There's a lot of people who you will confront on the street or at parties or wherever you may find them that say, oh, you know, it's happened before. We'll manage. We'll move on. It's not a big deal. That kind of apathetic nonsense is the kind of attitude I can't tolerate. If you don't recognize the suffering of your fellow Canadians, then you're blind and ignorant. And it shouldn't be that way. We must feel deep sorrow and deep compassion for those people who are losing their jobs for no more than the radical ideals of a socialist government. But with that aside, I'd like to conclude with this. Pierre Poilievre is definitely leadership material, whether he wants it or not. I don't know how many of you are aware of his works, but I would say that he is a person who deeply, deeply loves Canada. And I think under his leadership it would be a great country. But in spite of that, he's abdicated in favor of Scheer and has no aspirations at the time to run for the leadership. So what a pity that is. But Poilievre nails a few points that I couldn't summarize it better than he did. And I hope by watching this video you may express yourself on this channel and let me know how you're feeling. Because I empathize with you, those people whom do their best, but they find themselves out of work because of this self-manufactured recession in Canada. Thank you very much for your time. Bye-bye.